put you here. All right, I don't know if anybody's here yet. I didn't really plan this. This is some really just like last minute thing. Running some tests. I think it's going to go well. What I'm going to do is do a MIDS watch, but normally I just record this thing and then I start doing the editing and that. I thought, well, why not get you guys in part of the process and actually record one of these things live. Now, I'm not going to release this one. This is going to be a temporary video. I'll probably unlist it later and then put out the Thursday one. These usually take only about half an hour to get through. So the idea is I'm just going to have it run for an hour, and as it runs through its thing, if there's any questions or stuff in the chat, I'm not going to check it at first because like I'll lose my train of thought and the episode will completely get ruined. But after this is done, I'll read through the chat and then see if there's any discussion I have afterwards. Otherwise, it's just going to be off, and then you'll be able to see this on Thursday when it comes out. So let's see how it goes. Let's get everything ready and give it a go. There we go. In 3, 2, 1, and go. Evening, everybody. Welcome to the MIDS Watch. It's been a while since I've talked about it. You may be new to the channel. You maybe don't know what this is about. This is something that I remembered back from my military days. I used to work at the Network Operations Center, and we were on shift watches. And there's the one shift, they call it the midnight watch. It's like midnight until 7 in the morning. And it's very low key, very boring. Your whole thing has to be manned 24/7, so you have to be there. And so generally speaking, if you were ever working on like a university degree or anything of that sort, like your personal projects, that's the time you work on them during the huge amount of downtime. For me, one of the things I liked doing was listening to CBC Radio 3 with Jan Giameshi before he pulled his men's struggle-hugging nonsense. So I'm trying to bring the non-struggle huggy version of that here. You're going to love this episode. My favorite part about MIDS Watch stuff, by the way, is all this critique you see about the red pill. Like everybody's saying, oh, it's misogynist this, dread is bad that. It's always a case of somebody who has no idea what they're talking about. And then they wonder why I come back with such very pithy comments about it. And that's because for every critique you've had on this stuff, I guarantee you, we've already talked about it at length and swapped some notes. So whatever demons are in our closet, we're past this. And I would argue if you're following a red-pilled content creator, this is the kind of reason that you find that they're mostly not very good. Like they don't swap notes with other men. They kind of just go online and run their mouth off about this, that, and the other thing. And then once they're tested on something outside of their comfort zone, you're going to start seeing the problems. But the intention here is once you're through this, that we don't have to worry about that nonsense. And so this one, which I don't know what the title's going to be yet, you'll see it by the time this video comes out. But for the post itself, it's how much dread is too much. And we're going to go over the guy's intentions of running dread, the relationship between dread and anxiety, active dread and passive dread as it pertains to the concept of luxury branding, something that was originally coined by the poster I've referenced a lot in these episodes here, Jack Ten of Hearts, and is going to be the subject of book number 2 if and when I ever get the goddamn thing out. And the last part, something to think about too. So if your question is, how can I get my wife or girlfriend to do X? Then your issue isn't about X. Your issue is about frame. So I'll get started here. The guy's calling himself Red Dreaded. I don't know, whatever. It's better than the usual guys. They usually name themselves things like some variation of a wolf. And then you know right then that's going to be in for just a shit show. So this guy's been lurking a long time, using a new account to discuss this stuff, keeping separate from his main account, which absolutely smart thing you should be doing. He's 39. His wife is 34. They've been married 10 years, 2 kids. He recently learned about the red pill stuff, and he would consider himself closer to alpha than beta in most of his marriage. His wife is a stay-at-home mom, recently started a part-time job, awesome mother, awesome kids, defers to him as a good first officer. Our marriage is pretty great overall. My value is much higher than hers. We used to be equal before we got married, but after kids, she let herself go a little. I've stayed in shape. I'm a triathlete runner, and I've recently started to lift. Quick pause here while I go on. If you don't know the terms, so when he talks about alpha and beta in here, I know most people take that to mean alpha means good and beta means bad. And I'm going to continually harp on the correction here so people understand. The way he's using it here is to mean like the dominant sexually attractive features. Everybody talks about looks and game and all that stuff. And what does that mean? The easiest way I've found to describe it is in reference to the reactions it elicits in a woman. In this case, alpha is stuff that releases those dopamine responses, something that makes her attracted to you, want to sleep with you, the sexy ones. And then the other ones are like the oxytocin, the serotonin, and the idea that builds comfort. And some easy examples of that being aloof, being charming, sexual selection, like if a girl has to compete with another girl over you, these are all alpha things. Meanwhile, beta things are like making a girl orgasm or giving her a big hug when she's emotional and crying, things that let her know that you're not going to leave. Easy way to consider it. So back to his problems here. Obviously, you see here he's in shape. He's always pretty Chad-like, but there's an issue. He learned from this from a close friend of his. It was a game changer. Most of the things that he's reading about seem like obvious to me, and I've been practicing most of them without giving them a label. I use some dread on the wife, but I don't have to use much since she usually gets in line without a lot of resistance. I'm pausing basically after every paragraph on this one, but this is the part I absolutely love about it. Most times when the guys think and talk about red pill stuff is like, oh, did you guys just invent this yourself? You talk to some nerds in a laboratory or something. It's like, no. Guys are swapping notes. And as much as it's a very convenient filter to think that only sexless losers who never got any and don't know how to talk to women are here, it's not the case. My very, very first speech in Florida with that convention that shall not be named had an issue where, and the conversation was about dread anyways, and I was like, okay, there's the has-beens and the never was, there's like the fallen alphas and the stepped up to be beta guys. The terminology doesn't matter, but the point is all roads lead to Rome. In this case, somebody who's never been good with women, he's like hitting his 30s now, finds epiphany phase girls, want to settle down, start a family. All of a sudden he becomes attractive. They end up in a dead bedroom, and throughout pure desperation, they find their way to the red pill. On the other side of things, there's guys that were that high school Chad. They slept with everything and they had the perfect chatty life that everybody's all wanting to have. But life has a way of getting in the way with that. Now, because they were natural, they didn't put a name to any of this stuff. They never thought to they never thought to add a name or be deliberate about it. Things just kind of easily fell into place for them. There's a couple of guys that I follow on Twitter that have been red pill since the beginning, and this is kind of their stories. But then something happens. Gains some weight, becomes less attractive, maybe a medical condition, something. And then a guy finds out in the same way that when like a girl hits the wall, she realizes that everybody was just being nice to her because they wanted to sleep with her. And that realization, I think this is like as far as a male, like as far as our consideration for what the wall means for us, it's this. It's that once a girl realizes her model of the world didn't exist and it was just placating her, hits a lot of girls hard. That's why ugly spinsters are so damned vicious and ornery online. So imagine a guy going through that too. And the problem here is that when a guy goes through it, a girl has a social network. Hey, you go girl, we got this. We'll go drink together. Misery loves company. Girls will always collaborate with each other. From a guy's standpoint, there's nothing. Shut up, just put up with it. And guys will end up basically not only having their model of the world crash down and realizing that their great wife that was not like the other sluts is just like any other girl as soon as you put her in that position. And they have nowhere to go. So that's how you generally get lashing out. And a lot of girls who complain about like alcoholic husbands or abusive husbands, that sort of thing, it's kind of the position they ended up in. And it's nobody's fault. It just shows like one more reason why there's a need for the red pill. Like these guys have nowhere to go. And they're actually much easier to work with because you'll start talking about this stuff and they don't know the terminology and it sounds like a weird way to describe it, but they're like, yeah, of course, this makes sense. I've done this before. And so then 6 months, they get back on the horse. So carry on. He gets into his problem now. Her sex life is good. She's down to smash whenever I want. Rarely says no. I'm accommodating if she's tired or sick, but she complies if I insist. The problem is a lack of blowies. She hates giving them, says it makes her gag. When we were dating, she used to make an effort, but once we got married, it stopped completely. On the few occasions where he's insisted, all he got was a hand job with a mere pretense. She has like a hard no about anal, and I've made my peace with that, but I'm very disappointed that she won't blow me. Now, what I need advice on is whether I should increase the dread on her to make her give them, or if I should accept it's not going to happen, given that her life is so good otherwise. The thought of going through life without ever giving a blowjob is very depressing. Am I justified in trying to get them in my outside my marriage if she doesn't start giving them? Now, before I get to the Jack comment here, which is, it doesn't really help ops so much as it is like encapsulating a concept here about dread you guys need to know. Generally speaking, though, the way, since this time, we've kind of come to the conclusion that, if she doesn't want to give them, that's fine. Do you want them bad enough to go outside your marriage? Then do it. If you don't, then make peace with it. But you kind of have to just make a decision and stick to it. That's from a frame perspective. And it sounds very simple, but not really helpful for guys at this level. Anyway, some random guy actually came in with a pretty insightful comment. This is the question for yourself, not strangers on the internet. As for the other stuff, you should start reading the sidebar, start implementing 12 levels of dread, spend 10 weeks at each level. There's 3 possible outcomes. She does it, she doesn't do it, or she doesn't do it and you do something about it. And it's probably not going to be a popular opinion, but yes, accept that you will probably never get a blowjob from her. Now, this isn't a case where she used to blow you all the time and then stopped. She used to be a slut and then blew guys in the back alley and now she's saving the best. It's not that. Some girls are just grossed out by it, and even more by swallowing. So I believe everybody has a hard line and a soft line. Many women can push their soft line and do kinky stuff, but they'll eventually hit their hard line. And it sounds like your wife has a hard line at blowies. Now, personally, I respect the hard line. Can't argue with that one, really, right? It's not that you want to get them, you just want to receive them, but she has to want to give them, so it makes sense. I guess you can call that genuine desire, even though I don't really agree with the term. It'd be like my wife asking me to eat her out while she's on her period. Never going to happen. And this is probably what your wife thinks about blowies. And this sounds like one of those be dominant but not domineering cases. Sounds like you have a pretty good marriage. I wouldn't screw it up over something as silly as a blowjob. And then this is where we're going to get to the main part of this and the idea that's going to help you guys to conceptualize dread. So Jack starts off, this is the only good answer, but unfortunately, you phrased things insufficiently red pill, so let me try. In my screed about dread, which I'd link to, but I'm on the phone, so heck with it, I compared dread to a marketing campaign and the idea of anxiety. Good passive dread works like a good marketing campaign. It shows you an attractive product. It implies that only a select elite kind of person can own the product, and maybe this product won't be around forever. So these generate anxiety, which then compels the marketer's audience to go out and buy some stuff. Best company in the world in this time is Apple that does it, which has 1,000 people lining up at every store just to get the next iPhone Mini Air 65 and the Siri 128 gig hand job accessory. Actually, the best example recently is the Apple Watch, which is whatever. It's a neat trinket, but it's not a product category game changer. But all his Apple fanboy friends bought one. They'll tell him it's great. They're really happy with it. But he also noticed that after a couple months, nobody ever uses it anymore. It's because they bought the product out of compulsion. They didn't actually want it. But the Apple brand is literally that strong, and any sufficiently thin and white consumer electronic device will compel millions of people to go and buy that shit. They don't want it, but they have to have it. Because they bought the product out of compulsion. Remember that. So dread can compel your wife to pretty much do anything, but it can't ensure she'll ever want to do those things. And I think this is a very strong distinction. And I'm going to get to, think that one through, but I'm going to get to that in a second. He goes, the idea here is using dread, presenting yourself as a high-value product whose availability can't be taken for granted, will make your wife stop putting her interest over yours all the time, since that's what happens when husbands who are taken for granted. Every time someone says, I like to make him happy because that makes me happy, all they're really saying is, I like to make him happy because that means I'm adding value to his life so that he won't leave. And him not leaving makes me happy. Now, when the wife cooks me a steak on our anniversary Did she do that because she felt like I'd ditch her steakless ass at the first possible moment? Of course not. Here's what happened. I started dating my wife. She liked me. She thought about the ways she could add value to my life, things that would make her more attractive than other women, and she did those things. And there was an intersection of things she liked doing for their own sake, and this is generally what she keeps doing. And he makes some distinctions here. This isn't like a term that I want you guys to understand because it's kind of gone by the wayside since then, but he talks about healthy dread, as he'd call it, manifests like this. I need to do something nice for him. I want to cook a steak because I like cooking. And he talks about unhealthy dread sounds like this. I need to do something sexually pleasurable for him. I have to give him a blowy because this is the only thing that will make him happy sexually. So it'll work. You'll get more blowies. Enough dread will communicate to your wife, blow or divorce. And you can get the answer, blowies, but you can't guarantee she'll like it. Now, I assume for those of us who want more, we imagine our wives enthusiastically, going down and I trying to keep monetization as best I can here, but you get the idea. Dread can't make that happen. You'll just get a resentful blowy. Your wife will just, do the bare minimum and wonders whether she should hate you for reducing her marriage survival to this, or whether she should hate herself for sometimes finding that acceptable. Now, if you're into it, with blowjobs given half contempt and half self-loathing, then you may be okay with this. And I like the example he uses here next. Like, Tim Cook is selling overpriced and underpowered electronics to people who realize they don't really need them, and Apple will continue to do well as long as that's true. But it won't be true forever. At some point, the products actually need to be good. They need to be something people want to buy, a real industry game changer. Steve Jobs thought, nobody wants X, so I shouldn't make X. Tim Cook thinks, nobody will buy X, so I shouldn't make X. But he's totally fine making shit people buy what they don't want, which is why Steve Jobs is an industry legend and why half of you had to Google Tim Cook's name earlier to even know who I was talking about. Now, here's where there's gray area. A lot of guys go through this thing, think the wife's full of shit because they have wives that claimed they hated it, but now they enthusiastically love doing it all the time. But here's what happened. Go back to my earlier healthy dread sentence. I need to do something nice for him. I want to cook him a steak because I like cooking. So those wives liked giving blowies, but they didn't feel they needed to give them or do anything in particular to add value to their beta bucks of a husband's life. One-sided sexual acts generally fall under they make me feel good when I do them with a good partner. So increasing your value and using dread to indicate that taking your value for granted may have consequences, as taking anything for granted should, unlocks the first part of the sentence. Your wife stops thinking, sure, I like sex and even oral, but that? Am I supposed to put my... Anyways, yeah. Am I supposed to do that? Well, he really wants it since his birthday. Well, still not interested. It would be nice if a woman could overtly communicate this. If they could just say, look, it's not that I don't like giving it. I just don't like giving it to fat losers. And that's why I give them to you before we got married and not since then. That would make, the red pill wouldn't even need to be existing then. But girls can't articulate that. But I mean, Yop, according to himself, said he's a super alpha this whole time, so what gives? If his wife is a especially deceptive shrew harpy who misled her husband into thinking she was a, blowy loving nympho, like maybe, but probably not. She probably never liked it. And as time passed, she tried to trade it out for other things. And everybody does this. When you realize your wife likes X and you like X, then you do that instead of doing Y, where Y is usually something like, watching Sex and the City box DVD sets with me. Your wife cooks you a steak. You don't need to watch Sex and the City with her. You can do a bunch of other things that she'll like, but that also you'll like, or at least not compel you to ram a plastic straw through your eyeball. Now, this is all a long-winded way of saying that if your wife is adventurous and enthusiastic in the bedroom, adds value to your life in a lot of ways, maybe it's not worth a massive marital upheaval just because your wife doesn't blow you and you read some shit on a subreddit. So now, here's the thing about this. There's two parts to it. If you're looking at it strictly for what's the strategy for this guy, it's how bad do you want it, right? Is it the kind of thing that he's willing to nuke his marriage over? And there's no right answer to that. Like, I know most people will say, of course not. She's perfect in every way except for that one thing. Well, that's the best part about having a mental point of origin or frame, is that nobody else gets to decide but you what you find vitally important. It's been a couple cases. I had guys I would talk to really early on in their journey here where it was going through a divorce. And the wife wanted the kids, and he's talking about custody stuff. And it's like, yeah, like, for example, I'm in the military, and there's no way the judge is going to give me full custody if I'm in the military, because it's just, I can be deployed at any minute. So they want somebody who's more stable. So the wife is definitely going to get it. So what do I do to get custody? Well, I'm like, well, first thing is find out, do you really want it? Like, let's say if you're in the military, let's say you've got your career's kicking off because you've been following some red pill advice, you're more assertive at work, you're getting promoted. You've worked 15 years to whatever rank you're going to get. It's like, which one to you is more important? And I know you're going to instinctively say, well, my kids are the most important thing ever. And it's like, you don't need to BS me. Like, really look at it. You've invested 15 years into both of these things. So it's very clear they're both going to be important. And it's not saying the choice is between your career or abandoning your child, right? It's about whether full custody is more important than your career. And in that case, the guy I'm talking to is like, yeah, you know what? It makes sense. I think I'm going to stick it out with the career. I've been deployed a few times. I like going to fight in Afghanistan and shit like that. And he's like, that's the choice. I'm like, perfect. So now we just got to know. She's going to get custody. What's it going to cost you? And what do you have to do to make that work out? And he did the math, and he was earning enough. He's like, it's basically nothing. Like, it's a couple grand a month. And, she gets to stay whatever house she wants to stay. And I get my life. And it worked out for him. So on this guy, he has to make that decision too, right? Like, what do you want? And if he wants it that bad, well then, try to get it from her. Maybe it's a dread thing. Maybe he misrepresented his attractiveness. Maybe the triathlon guy has a huge problem with like codependent behavior, and that's something to address. We don't know, because he didn't say, and he never came back. Most of these guys never come back. But you try that stuff, you sort out your own house, you make sure there's nothing unattractive about you, you make sure your attractiveness is up, and he should have a small road ahead of him if he's already jacked and, getting all this other stuff. You realize, okay, it's just a thing that's not going to happen with this one. She gets first stab at your libido, not so custody. So you can either go get a side piece discreetly, keep the marriage going the way it goes. Girls would rather share an alpha than be saddled with a beta, right? And then there's the risk that if you've overestimated your value in the relationship, that things go south. But again, how bad do you want it, right? And then the other choice is, okay, no, I like the way things are. I'm not going to take that risk just for this. So just let it go. Now that's a cuck thing to do. Yeah. There's no right answers. And the kind of guy online who's going to shit on you for making a choice, one choice or another, he doesn't get to live with the consequences of these choices. He just gets to rabble rouse with his what's more alpha bro bullshit. So until they start paying rent, they don't get a say. Some great examples of this actually in like the online space. When I first got here, there was a bunch of brands like Jack Murphy and a couple others. I won't name names because it's not the intent here to put people on blast other than the Jack is whatever. And they would do things like the wife has cheated, I took her back, or I took my girlfriend out on Tinder dates to go get blasted by some other dude. And there's all this weird like stuff on there that doesn't really fit the mold of like a traditional conservative monogamous or the alpha who doesn't share his women type thing. They got a lot of grief over it too. But then I'm thinking, like, why? Why would you get grief over this? It's because you're not owning it. Like, the reason I mentioned Jack is I use his as an example. He was married, has a kid. The kid was like high school age or something like that. Like, he did all the trad stuff ever. Fine. She left, took the kids. Sucks for him. He gets himself a girlfriend. He wants to be a degenerate ass. And I'm like, yeah, you have nothing else to account for to a traditional conservative type. You did the plow horse thing. You raised the kid. You did the good dad thing. If you want to be a degenerate, dirtbag the rest of your life, well, you've earned it. So fuck them. But I don't know. Most guys seem to have a real issue with owning their things because they're so busy focused on authenticity. They're not focused at all on, I guess, frame. Anyways, so that's something to think about on this one. This is why I really like this. I'm going to cut this off at about half an hour, and then we'll do some questions. If you guys are listening to this after the fact, I tried something new with this one. I recorded the audio live, and then I put it out into a video. So if I do these on a schedule, I'll put something in the description so you can see about these, catch it on the next time. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers. Okay. Nice. And ooh, that's kind of neat. All right, so hope you guys enjoyed yourselves. Have fun. Nobody in the questions in the chat, which is fine by me. I will catch you guys later. Actually, you know what? Before we go, one small thing on my own. I don't know. I really like these ones. My favorite part about the dueling thing with Jack is he's not very friendly to Red Pill. Like, he understands the value like all of us does, and he's kind of like me in the sense that just because you're part of the locker room doesn't mean you're going to get a pass from being shit on for stupid advice or falling too far into the manosphere nonsense. And I really think every guy should take a moment and do that himself, just so he doesn't end up being like the cultist that they're all worried about. Oh, that's why. Ha! Oops. Totally forgot to turn this goddamn thing live. Son of a bitch. All right, well, I'll leave it up for a day then. Ah, well. Didn't work out. We'll try it next time. Ta. Cheers.